What's going on, YouTube? It's Dash Jovis, and we're back for more tier slop. So I've already ranked hand traps in the August 2025 Master Duel format, and I'm going to be ranking board breakers next. I've got my tiers here from always run to never run, and yeah, let's just get started. So Dark Hole and Raigeki you will occasionally run. This is mostly in board breaker Tenpai. There is a slight advantage to running Dark Hole in some decks because you either want to destroy your own monsters or you want to destroy monsters your opponent has given you to floodgate you out, or you want to destroy your own Nibiru token, for example, in Melodious. So if you were running board breakers, sometimes Dark Hole is actually better than Raigeki, but Raigeki is a better top deck in a grind game, so you might want to play Raigeki instead of Dark Hole, but for the most part these are all just copies of the same card when you're going second trying to break boards. I'm going to say Lightning Storm and Harpy's Feather Duster are often run. Board Breaker Tenpai, like Sky Striker Tenpai, tends to play these cards, and Heavy Storm as well is being represented here by Harpy's Feather Duster. And just being able to blow up back row is actually pretty important in this format. There's several key pieces of back row that are useful in both Maliss and Ryzeal, and being able to force your opponent to kind of shotgun them or lose them is really good. Obviously, Harpy's Feather Duster and Heavy Storm are better than Lightning Storm is, but Lightning Storm is slightly more flexible, and generally speaking, if you're running those two, you're also running Lightning Storm. I'm going to say never run Sphere Mode in this format, because honestly, it's just not worth it. It's great if you can clear away 3 monsters and your opponent has nothing left on their board anymore, right? But in this format, you're actually often ending on 2 monsters, not 3. So, like, Fiendsmith Ryzeal, for example, is only going to end on 2 monsters. The full God combo for Maliss only ends on 2 monsters until they summon more out of the graveyard or banish zones. And when it does summon those monsters, it gets a lot of immediate value that tributing over their monsters at that point is a little too late. It could be effective against pure Ryzeal if it goes completely uninterrupted, but I think you're better off running Lava Golem in this format, because a lot of the time that deals with 2 monsters on the board, which is the whole board, and it's just... obviously the big problem with both of these is that they use up your normal summon, so you don't necessarily want to run them in a deck that needs its normal summon. But if you're trying to play board breakers in a deck that doesn't use its normal summon, then you could consider Lava Golem right now. I think it's occasionally good. I have been got by this a couple of times with my Ryzeal deck, and it has been somewhat effective against my Maliss deck. I'm going to say Hamp. I don't know about Hamp. I don't see a lot of Hamp. I'm going to say never run. I think you would only run it in a Sky Striker deck, and I think they're just better board breakers for Sky Striker to run. For example, occasionally run Widow Anchor or Shark Cannon or any of the other... this basically represents engines, like Sky Striker engines. And I think you would occasionally run Sky Striker engines with cards like Widow Anchor and Shark Cannon and Afterburners and all of those cards. Those can be actually pretty good, especially if you have Engage in order to draw a card while searching them out. It can actually be a key piece of the Sky Striker Tenpai deck, for example. So it is pretty good, but I would say you generally are not going to be running Hamp in those decks. Kaijus and Santa Claus as well. I'm going to say rarely run. I mean, it is nice to be able to get over towers type monsters. I've seen the water deck play Gameciel because the water deck does need water monsters to tribute in order to do its thing. And so having a hand trap, or like a board breaker rather, that is engine and non-engine is kind of useful. And it's not like tributing the detonator or tributing an Appaloosa is bad per se, but I think there's better things you can be doing most of the time. I'm going to say Kashtira Fenrir is occasionally run, but you mostly see it in engines, like Kashtira engines. Because it's at 1, it doesn't search itself, so there is no running 2 or 3 of them as like an engine in and of itself. You're either running Kashtira Fenrir, Kashtira Unicorn, Kashtira Birth, and Pressure Planet Race Off, or you're not running any of those cards most of the time. But that engine is still pretty good. Giving up the battle phase to break boards is a little weaker, which is why I don't think it's actually that good. I'm going to put Pankratops also in here. Typically, you see Pankratops in dinosaur decks now, and not outside of dinosaur decks. But in a dinosaur deck where you have multiple ways to summon the Pankratops from your deck, yeah, you should probably run a Pankratops or two. Fit it in with your non-engine, and then it's also engine at the same time. It's kind of good. It's not a bad card. It's not as good as it used to be, and generally speaking, Fenrir has kind of supplanted it as the one you'll run if you're just going to run one of these. But there are decks where you will still go for the Pankratops. I'm going to say Alpha is rarely run. I've had some trouble with Alpha, but it's not really that good. And if you're playing a Beast, Beast Warrior, Wing Beast deck, then it gets a lot better, but it's still far from perfect. And I don't know, for a little while there, I'm pretty sure it was coded improperly. Just give me a second. Alpha, the Master of Beasts. Must be special summon from your hand while the total attack of all monsters your opponent controls is more than that of all the monsters you control. There isn't a hard once per turn on this, but for a little while there it was coded so that you could only do it once per turn. I think they fixed that now, but I haven't played with it since then, so I don't know that for sure. But yeah, I mean, you could run it in a Beast, Beast Warrior, Wing Beast deck, but I don't think it's actually that good, and I think you'd probably be better off playing hand traps or other board breakers rather than Alpha most of the time. I'm going to say Droplet is actually the only always run board breaker in this format. It's the one that I'm actually main decking, main decking in all my decks right now. I think maybe Maliss I'm not playing it because I just want to run Dominus Impulse instead, and I want to go for more of a hand trap approach. But it's really good against Ryzeal. It has applications against Branded. It has applications against Maliss. Just making it so they can't respond with a trap and or monster effect. Something for example, in Fiendsmith Ryzeal, I often send Paradise to the graveyard, and then I'm setting up a Paradise, send Desiree, send something to the graveyard thing going on, while I'm also preventing Maliss from activating their trap that would allow them to dodge the Droplet. That's really good. It's kind of nice that it's a good card when you're going first or going second too, unlike a lot of these which are exclusively used for going second. Yeah, I think it's a really good card, and you should be considering it if you're going to play any board breakers. And even if it's your only board breaker, you should still be considering it right now. It is actually that good. I'm going to say don't run Dark Ruler no more, however. There's just, over time, there's been so many answers to Dark Ruler no more. Now you can chain trap cards and then chain Desiree in order to negate it, which wasn't a thing you used to be able to do. Nowadays you have layered end boards where a bunch of your interruptions are actually coming out of the graveyard or coming out of spells and traps or some combination of the two. And so it's just or coming out of the field spell in the case of Ryzeal. So it's just you shut down the monsters on their board, but they still have Paradise in their graveyard and Ryzeal Cross, and you're not going to necessarily be able to play through that and their hand traps anyway. So I'm not convinced that you should be running Dark Ruler no more. Forbidden Chalice, I'm going to say don't run Forbidden Chalice. It's not terrible. It's not terrible. You can use it in the damage step. That's kind of clutch. You can use it as a battle trap if you're engaging in combat with monsters of similar stat lines. So that's kind of clutch. And obviously it's basically just an imperm that you can chain when you have stuff on the field, so that's kind of good. But I think typically you're going to be playing something like Widow Anchor over Forbidden Chalice, and you should pretty much always be playing Droplet over Chalice. I'm going to say don't run Book of Moon right now. There was a time when this was the best neg 1 in the game, but now I think that's actually infinite impermanence. You know, it's still not a bad thing to do. Flipping a detonator face down can actually be pretty effective. Like pairing this with Droll, actually pretty good. But you know, dealing with one monster and not even having any effect against the Maliss end board is pretty rough, to be honest. Like I don't think flipping one monster face down if you go first is going to be enough to stop a lot of these decks from comboing off either, unless you get them with their zone placement or something. And I mean, it's the same basic case for Book of Lunar Eclipse. Like, you don't want to be discarding a card to flip two monsters face down when that's bad against Maliss. Like, so bad against Maliss. And discarding a card is already a pretty hefty cost. And then, like, sure, it's good against Fiendsmith Ryzeal exactly, but, like, it still doesn't deal with all the aspects of the Fiendsmith Ryzeal end board anyway, because it is a slightly layered end board. Book of Eclipse compared to Book of Lunar Eclipse is slightly better. You know, flipping all monsters face down. I mean, sure, you're going to give your opponent some draws, but, you know, and all of these can be used to dodge targeted effect negation in certain situations. So that's pretty good. But it's ashable, and again, it doesn't break Maliss's board. So I think you could consider running it if you were, like, teching anti-Ryzeal cards into your deck to build an anti-Ryzeal deck and farm Ryzeal, or if you were splitting between anti-Ryzeal and anti-Maliss cards and just hoping to see the right ones in the matchup, I guess you could run it, but I don't think I'd recommend it. Change of Heart, I think, is just really bad right now. This stands in for Mind Control, too. Yeah, it's kind of nice to be able to steal your opponent's monster and then use it as link material or whatever, but there's spell and trap negates in both of the main decks. Like, Ryzeal does it via Desiree with the Fiendsmith build, and Maliss does it via Cyber's D-Save Worm with the Firewall, Dragon, Dark Fluid, Neo, Tempest, Terahertz. And so I just don't think Change of Heart is actually that good right now. Like, it's just going to get negated. Oh, I see I'm missing something. Evenly matched. I think you could occasionally run evenly matched. Like, if you don't need the battle phase, then evenly matched is actually a pretty good card for breaking boards in the current format. It does kind of play into spell and trap negates the same way Change of Heart does, but there's no hard ones per turn, and wiping the board all the way down to just a detonator or just one monster or whatever is actually pretty effective, and the fact that it banishes face down is also really good. And there's no once per turn on it, so if they negate the first one and you have a second, you just fire off the second right away and crush them, right? It's like, it's really good against Ryzeal, especially pure Ryzeal. It's also the only problem with it is that it does use up your battle phase, and the main board breaker deck in the format is Tenpai. So, like, you can't really run it in the main board breaker deck, even though it's a good board breaker. But, like, I've seen this teched in other decks, and it has kicked my butt before. It's not a bad card. I'm going to say you can occasionally run Enemy Controller. It's a lot better than Change of Heart for a couple of reasons. First of all, you can use it on your opponent's turn, which is really good, especially if you're, like, combining Enemy Controller with something like Widow Anchor. If you Widow Anchor their thing, then Enemy Controller tribute their thing, take control of a different thing. Like, that's really strong. Also, you can use it to dodge Infinite Impermanence and Effect Failure and any Forbidden Droplet that doesn't send a spell. So that's really good. So, like, I could see this being played. I did play this a little while in this format, and it didn't serve me so poorly. I ultimately decided that a hand trap approach was still where I wanted to be. But yeah, this card is actually a lot better than you think. I'm going to say often run Triple Tactics Thrust and often run Triple Tactics Talent. In fact, Talent might even be always run, but I personally have started cutting Talent from my list. My problem with Talent is that I find oftentimes it doesn't get turned on. Like, especially if you're going first and you're hoping they hand trap you. It's just like, I'd rather have another piece of non-engine that I can actually use on my opponent's turn than a dead Talent in my hand. But that's not to say that Talent is a bad card. Obviously, drawing 2 is absolutely nutty. Obviously, ripping a card out of your opponent's hand is absolutely nutty. And then the steal control of something without targeting it is a lot better than stealing control of it with targeting it, because targeting protection is so common these days. But, and I mean, it does single-handedly break down the Ryzeal board. And obviously, Thrust, more copies of Talents, but also it searches out any of your Harpy's Feather Dusters or Regekis, and then it also can search out cards like Branded Fusion or Gold Sarcophagus and Tenpai. So like I think if you're playing a board breaker approach with lots of those types of cards, then Thrust is really good. Artemet Slay. Artemet Slay is actually a really good card in this format. You already are running Mereological Aggregator and Packbit and other targets for it in your extra decks just naturally right now. So it's not so hard to make space for like the 1 or 2 targets you wouldn't be running. And, it does single-handedly take down the Fiendsmith Ryzeal board by itself. I mean, it leaves Paradise in their graveyard, but, it gets rid of the Caesar and negates the Detonator. I mean, if they have Cross, then you can force them to negate with the Cross and use up their Cross negate, and then you still have to play through Detonator, but then or Caesar, or whichever one you've left on their board. But, I mean, if you get rid of the Detonator and then target the Caesar, then maybe they have 1 Cross negate off of Duo Drive. So, like, yeah, it's just a really flexible card that's really good at dealing with multiple threats. I think the big question when you're running Ultimate Slayer is what you're going to run as your Fusion and Link targets, because you can technically run Tri-Brigade, Arms, Bucephalus, and Garura in order to draw a card off of Links and Fusions. But alternatively, you could just run Entus for Fusions, which is a slightly better target against Fusion decks and doesn't play into Droll as much. And then you end up with a slightly worse target against Link decks, either playing a brick in the main deck to send Trouble Sunny, or sending Tri-Brigade Faragite in order to draw and put 1 back, which is not as good as just drawing a card, obviously. So I still think I would prefer to play the Entis versus Fusion decks, but with Maliss, the Link deck being there, maybe you just have to play Bucephalus and accept that that's not always going to make your matchup against decks like Branded as good. I'm going to say Super Poly is often run. It's not particularly common. It's not as common in this format as it was last format, because the Ryzeal board isn't weak to it. Like, the Ryzeal board doesn't just immediately get turned into an Earth Golematic Nister the way the 2 aspects of the Maliss board that aren't in the graveyard are. But if you're playing a deck like Branded, where you have room for multiple Super Poly targets, and you can make those targets in different ways or use them in different ways, then, like, yeah, Super Poly is really good. Like, if you can actually Super Poly your opponent without having to waste too much extra deck space, and you're just naturally playing these cards that play well with Super Poly, like Fallen of Albaz and stuff, then yeah, you should probably just be playing Super Poly. And in a lot of Fusion decks, I think that's the case. I think you really should just be playing the Super Poly. It's just, I wouldn't run it generically. I think you have to have either enough space in the extra deck to run a few Super Poly targets, or enough of your own monsters in the deck that are already Super Poly targets. And because it's so bad against Ryzeal, it's not in a great position right now, but I think you just always play it in Branded, and I think you could consider playing it in a lot of other decks. Kurikara Div Incarnate. I'm going to say don't run this. It has beaten me before. It is actually kind of dope. You bait all of your opponent's interruptions on the board, and then you tribute their board and attack them for game. And if you're playing Snake Eyes Ash, then you can consider this card, because you can search it with Snake Eye Ash. So, like, you can just save it for the end of the combo and then search this and then save yourself a little bit of time. It can actually be the thing that saves you from losing in time. But I don't worry about losing to the timer too much, because if you play fast, it won't happen very often, and usually those games where it does happen, we're very close or already lost anyway. But some people are going to want to run this because it is kind of a good way to blow people out. I just don't think it's quite as good as Kaiju's or Lava Golem. Metaltronus, I haven't seen this a lot, but I think you could consider it. So I'm going to put it in occasionally run. So what's cool about Metaltronus is a few things. First of all, if your opponent has a detonator on the board and they don't have a duo drive with a material, you can immediately banish their detonator face down by summoning detonator from your extra deck. They can't respond with anything, and their detonator is gone permanently, and you've turned off all of their pops and their negate. I mean, that's pretty good. Alternatively, you could summon Underworld Goddess of the Closed Moon, and negate the detonator while getting yourself access to full Fiendsmith combo. That's pretty good. And then you can use this on the White Binder to both negate and banish the White Binder face down, which really does turn off a lot of what is being done in Maliss. Like, that's a lot of the power of the Maliss deck is in the White Binder loops. I think the big problem with this card is that it's ashable. It's a lot like Book of Eclipse where it's ashable, but the difference is it's good against Ryzeal and Maliss and can be played in, and if you have room in the extra deck for more targets, it gets a lot better. I just don't necessarily like my board breakers being weak to Ash Blossom when everyone's running Ash Blossom from Malcharmies and Max C. Then lastly, we have Spell Card Soul Exchange. And I'm going to say rarely run this. These aren't organized in terms of anything but what tier they're in. It's not like I think this is the best thing that you never run or whatever, right? Like, I don't think Lava Golem is actually the best thing you never run, and I'm not going to reorganize them that way. But Spell Card Soul Exchange is basically a soul exchange that allows you to tribute as many of your opponent's monsters as you want to tribute summon a monster, but when it goes to the graveyard, it immediately allows your opponent to do the same thing. Now, most of the time, your opponent's not going to have monsters to tribute summon your monster with, but some of the time they will. So not only do you have to be playing a deck where you want to tribute summon monsters, but you have to not be playing in a matchup against a deck that wants to tribute summon monsters. So I think it's a little bit weak, but I could see it being played. It's not the worst card ever. Anywho, that is my tier list for the board breakers in the August 2025 format. I didn't have every single board breaker in existence in here. Just because it's not on here doesn't mean I think it could be impossible to run. These are just the ones I think are most worth talking about. Thanks for watching the video, everybody. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And have a good life, everyone. Goodbye!